My parents spent 18 years convincing me I was the reason their lives fell apart. And, for the longest time, I believed them. Not because they ever proved it, but because when you're a child, you don't question the people who teach you who you are. You become whatever they tell you. In my family, I wasn't the daughter. I was the curse. My older brother, Curtis, was born 3 years before me. According to everyone who knew us, he was perfect. Straight A's. Captain of his Little League team. Teachers adore him. Neighbors talked about how polite he was. Whenever relatives came over, they pinched his cheeks, smiled proudly, and predicted he'd grow up to do something extraordinary. Then I was born. 6 months later, my dad lost his job. That was the beginning of the story my parents told themselves. And eventually, the story they forced me to live inside. When I was 2, my mom got into a car accident. When I was 4, my grandmother passed away after battling cancer. When I was 5, our family dog disappeared. Most families would have called it bad luck. Mine called it me. At first, my mom laughed whenever she said it. There goes my little storm cloud. Everyone chuckled, even relatives. It sounded harmless, like one of those embarrassing childhood nicknames parents give their kids. Except, she never stopped. Every accident became proof. Every setback became evidence. Every disappointment somehow circled back to me. Eventually, the smiles disappeared. Only the accusations remained. By the time I was 10, it wasn't a joke anymore. If the electric bill came in higher than expected, it's because you leave lights on. Even when I hadn't. If a glass shattered in the kitchen, I knew your bad energy would rub off. If Dad came home angry after work, he'd point at me before he'd even take his shoes off. I can't catch a break with that girl in this house. Those words landed harder every year. Not because they were loud, because they became normal. Curtis learned quickly. Kids imitate what they see. He started calling me Jinx. The nickname spread through school. Friends heard him say it. Neighbors laughed when he introduced me that way. Teachers overheard it. Soon, even I introduced myself like that. I'm Jinx. Like I didn't deserve my real name. Children will believe almost anything if enough adults repeat it. I honestly thought I was dangerous. I apologized constantly. Someone tripped? I'm sorry. The Wi-Fi stopped working? Sorry. Rain ruined a barbecue? I quietly wondered if maybe I'd caused that too. I started trying to make myself smaller, quieter, invisible. If I stayed out of everyone's way, maybe fewer bad things would happen. Maybe everyone would finally be happy. I worked harder than anyone my age. Straight A's. Perfect attendance. No trouble. At 16, I got my first job. Not because I wanted spending money, because I wanted to stop hearing how expensive I was. Every paycheck went towards school supplies, clothes, anything my parents would have had to buy. Every dollar felt like another apology for existing. Yet, somehow, nothing changed. No matter what I accomplished, I was still the family's bad luck charm. When Curtis got accepted into college, you would have thought he'd won the lottery. My parents rented decorations, invited neighbors, cooked enough food to feed 30 people. My dad stood in the backyard bragging that his son was destined for greatness. People clapped. People toasted. People celebrated. I helped clean up afterward. Nobody noticed. 1 year later, I got accepted to that exact same university. Only, I had something Curtis didn't. A scholarship. A better one. I came home holding the acceptance letter so tightly my hands were shaking. I remember thinking, maybe this time, maybe this would finally make them proud. I placed the envelope on the kitchen table. Mom barely looked up. Scholarships disappear. She shrugged. People like you never keep good things for long. Dad didn't even open the letter. You should go to community college. I frowned. Why? So, when you fail? He looked me straight in the eyes. It won't embarrass us. Silence filled the room. The kind of silence that feels heavy enough to crush your ribs. Something inside me didn't break. It hardened. I stopped trying to earn love that only existed for someone else. Instead, I made a plan. Every paycheck went into a savings account they didn't know existed. I skipped buying things I wanted. worked weekends, worked holidays, saved every cent. By 18, I had enough. Not much, but enough. Enough to leave. Moving day came. 2 suitcases. 1 backpack. Everything I owned fit inside them. Nobody helped me carry anything. Curtis stayed upstairs playing video games. Dad watched television. Mom leaned against the doorway. You'll be back. She folded her arms confidently. Call us when you realize how hard life is. I nodded, closed the trunk, got in my car, and drove away. None of them waved goodbye. Neither did I. For the first hour, I kept waiting for something terrible to happen. A tire blowout, engine failure, an accident. Because that's what I'd been taught. Good things didn't happen to me. The universe always punished me eventually. Except, nothing happened. The sun stayed out. Traffic moved. Music played through the speakers. The farther I got from home, the lighter the air felt. By the time my hometown disappeared in the rearview mirror, I took the deepest breath I'd ever taken. It felt like breathing for the first time. College wasn't easy, but it wasn't impossible either. The hardest part wasn't the classes. It was realizing normal families existed. My roommate failed an exam once. She laughed, ordered pizza, studied harder. Nobody screamed. Nobody blamed her existence. Nobody called her cursed. I remember sitting there stunned. People could make mistakes and still be loved. That thought kept me awake half the night. Slowly, my life changed. I made friends, real friends, people who invited me because they enjoyed my company, not because they pitied me. I joined clubs, stayed late in the architecture lab, found professors who believed in me. Every achievement chipped away at the lie I'd carried my whole life. Maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I never had been. For years later, I graduated with honors. No family attended. Honestly, I didn't expect them to. Instead, my friends screamed my name from the crowd. They hugged me afterward, took pictures, dragged me out for dinner. That night, for the first time, I celebrated myself. Life kept getting better. I landed a job at an architecture firm 4 hours away from my hometown. Started at the bottom. Stayed late. Learned everything I could. 5 years passed. Promotion after promotion. Eventually, project manager. I bought a small condo. With my own money. No loans from family. No handouts. Just years of hard work. Then I adopted a cat. She curled up beside me every night. Unlike the dog my parents claimed ran away because of me, she stayed. Then I met Celian. Kind. Patient. The type of man who listened more than he spoke. He never looked at me like I was something to fix. He just loved me. Quietly. Consistently. Without conditions. And little by little, the voice in my head stopped sounding like my mother's. Meanwhile, back home, everything unraveled. Dad started drinking heavily. Lost another job. Mom ignored health problems until they became emergencies. Curtis dropped out of college. Moved back into his childhood bedroom. Couldn't hold down a job. Spent most days playing video games while my parents supported him completely. The golden child wasn't shining anymore. But somehow, they still weren't looking at themselves. They were waiting for me to fail. Every year, my mother called on my birthday, not to celebrate, to check. So, she'd ask, how are things holding up? When I mentioned promotions, they won't last. When I bought my condo, how much debt are you hiding? When I said I was happy, she laughed. Give it time. Eventually, I stopped telling her anything. Then, I stopped answering altogether. 3 years passed. No calls. No messages. Nothing. Until one Tuesday afternoon. My phone lit up. Dad. For a second, I just stared. 3 years of silence. My thumb hovered over the screen. Curiosity won. I answered. There wasn't even a hello. His voice came through cold and impatient. Your brother needs surgery. A pause. We need $15,000. No. How have you been? No apology. No concern. Just a price tag. I froze. Then he said the words that made every childhood memory come rushing back. You owe this family. And suddenly, the curse I'd spent years escaping was standing at my front door again. For almost 20 minutes, I just sat there. The phone rested face down on my coffee table, but I couldn't stop staring at it. It felt like it might ring again, like my father would call back with another demand. Or worse, another reminder that, in his eyes, I still owed him for the crime of being born. The number kept echoing inside my head. $15,000. Not, how have you been? Not, I miss you. Just, $15,000. 3 years of silence, reduced to an invoice. Outside, the sun slipped lower behind the buildings. The living room slowly filled with shadows. I never bothered turning on the lights. The darkness somehow felt familiar. My cat padded across the floor and jumped beside me on the couch, pressing her warm body against my leg. Without thinking, I ran my fingers through her fur. The steady rhythm of her purring grounded me. It reminded me where I was. Not my parents' house. Not that frightened little girl anymore. My home. My life. My peace. Or, at least, it had been. The front door opened around 6:30. Celian stepped inside carrying his work bag. He smiled automatically until he saw me. His expression changed instantly. The room was almost dark. Dinner hadn't been started. I was still sitting exactly where I'd been hours earlier. Phone clutched tightly in both hands. He quietly set his bag down. Didn't rush. Didn't bombard me with questions. He simply walked over, sat beside me, and gently asked, "What happened?" The words came out of me almost mechanically, like I was reading from a script instead of reliving the worst part of my childhood. My dad called. Celian stayed silent. He wants $15,000. Still silent. It's for Curtis's surgery. I swallowed. And, apparently, I owe it to them. Only then did I look at him. His jaw had tightened. Not with annoyance. With anger. Not at me. For me, that tiny difference almost made me cry. He asked exactly one question. What did he actually say? So I repeated every word, every demand, every ounce of entitlement. By the time I finished, the room was completely silent again. Except this silence felt different. Safe. Celian reached over and took my hand. Are you okay? Such a simple question, but it caught me off guard. Because I honestly didn't know. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to apologize. And somewhere deep inside, a frightened 10-year-old girl whispered, "Maybe they're right." I hated that voice. I hated that after all these years, it still knew how to find me. That night, sleep never came. Celian drifted off beside me, his breathing slow and steady. I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Then, the memories started. Not one at a time. All at once. I was 6 years old again. Dad slammed the front door after losing another job. Mom didn't come for him. She looked at me. If you weren't such bad luck. The sentence never left me. Then another memory. I was 2. Mom told everyone about the car accident. She laughed while telling the story. I was thinking about her in the back seat. Everyone chuckled. I laughed too. I didn't understand I was laughing at myself. Then another. My grandmother's funeral. I remembered overhearing relatives whisper, "Things haven't been right since that little girl was born." I remembered standing behind a doorway, listening, believing. The tears came silently. No sobbing. No dramatic breakdown. Just tears sliding across the pillow while I stared into the darkness. The next morning, I called my therapist, straight to voicemail. Her office was closed. My hands trembled as I left a message. I think I need an emergency appointment. I almost hung up, then forced myself to finish. My parents contacted me. That was enough. She'd understand. An hour later, the receptionist called back. There had been a cancellation. 2 o'clock. I accepted before she finished speaking. Then called work. Claimed I was sick. Technically, it wasn't a lie. The hours before therapy crawled by. I tried distracting myself. I cleaned the kitchen, then cleaned it again, organized my bookshelf alphabetically. Changed my mind. Organized it by color. Started a movie. Couldn't remember a single scene. Made coffee. Forgot to drink it. My mind refused to stay anywhere except that phone call. By the time I pulled into my therapist's parking lot, I was 15 minutes early. I stayed inside my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to rehearse what I wanted to say. Nothing sounded right. Everything sounded childish. Eventually, I walked inside. The familiar office smelled faintly of lavender. Warm lighting. Soft music. The same chair I'd sat in dozens of times before. Only this time, it felt like I'd gone backwards. Like I wasn't 28 anymore. I was 18. Or 12. Or maybe 6. Dr. Molina smiled gently. What happened? That was all it took. Everything spilled out. The phone call. The demand. The guilt. The memories. The fear that maybe saying no made me selfish. For nearly 20 minutes, I talked without stopping. She never interrupted. When I finally ran out of words, she waited, then quietly asked, "What do you want to do?" Not, "What should you do?" Not, "What would a good daughter do?" Just, "What do you want?" I stared at her. Nobody had ever asked me that before. Eventually, I admitted the truth. I don't want to give them the money. The words felt dangerous, almost forbidden. But Curtis really does need surgery. She nodded. Those can both be true. That sentence hit me harder than I expected, because I'd spent my whole life believing every decision had only two choices. Good daughter, bad daughter, loyal, selfish, obedient, worthless. She was showing me there was another option. Boundaries. She asked why Curtis didn't have health insurance. I opened my mouth, then stopped, because I honestly didn't know. Later, I realized I did know. He'd never held a job long enough. My parents had spent years protecting him from consequences. While I worked at 16 to buy my own clothes, they were still doing his laundry at 31. The realization sat heavily in my chest. Not because I envied him, because I finally saw how different our childhoods really were. I wasn't treated harshly because I deserved it. I was treated harshly because someone had to carry the blame. Before I left, Dr. Molina gave me homework. Write down exactly what you're willing to offer. Not what they wanted. What I was actually comfortable giving. For the first time, helping didn't have to mean sacrificing myself. That evening, Celian ordered Thai food. Neither of us felt like cooking. Halfway through dinner, he quietly said, "What if you helped Curtis instead of helping your parents?" I looked up. What do you mean? Research financial assistance. Hospital payment plans. Medical grants. Help him directly. The idea settled into my mind almost immediately. That felt different. I wasn't abandoning my brother. But I also wasn't rewarding the people who spent 18 years convincing me I ruined their lives. For the first time since Dad's call, I felt something close to relief. Saturday morning. Coffee steamed beside my laptop. A blank email glowed on the screen. Dad's address waited in the recipient line. I started typing. Deleted everything. Started again. Deleted it. Again. Finally, the words came. I understand Curtis needs surgery. I want to help him receive proper medical care. But I won't send money directly. Instead, I offered something else. I'd help research payment plans, medical assistance, charity programs, anything that actually solved the problem, not just delayed it. I read the email 5 times. Saved it. Walked away. Sunday. I read it again. Celian read it too. He nodded once. It's fair. I inhaled deeply. Clicked. Send. The email disappeared, along with the last chance to take it back. The phone rang less than 24 hours later. Mom. My stomach dropped instantly. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Instead, I answered. I barely managed to say hello before she exploded. After everything we've done for you. Her voice cut through the speaker like broken glass. I can't believe how selfish you've become. I tried explaining. She talked over me. I mentioned helping Curtis directly. She laughed. That's not real help. We need family loyalty. Family loyalty. The words almost made me laugh, because loyalty had only ever worked one way in our house. Then she began listing every mistake I'd ever made. The B I got in 6th grade math, not making the school play, forgetting to empty the dishwasher once. Each memory twisted into proof that I'd always disappointed them. I felt myself shrinking, becoming quieter, exactly like I used to, until she said something that changed everything. She sighed dramatically. You should have plenty of money. You don't have children draining your life the way Curtis drained ours. Time stopped. A child. Draining them. Just by existing. The exact same thing they'd spent 18 years saying about me. Something inside me finally snapped. Not angrily. Cleanly. Like a chain breaking after years under tension. I laughed. A cold, disbelieving laugh. Mom stopped talking. What exactly is so funny? I took one slow breath. Then another. And for the first time in my entire life, I refused to become small. I looked at the phone, took one slow breath, and this time, I didn't let her interrupt. No. The word came out calm, almost surprisingly calm. I've spent my entire life apologizing for things that were never my fault. She tried to cut in. I kept going. You blamed me when Dad lost his job. You blamed me for a car accident. You blamed me for Grandma getting cancer. You blamed me for a dog running away. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Short. Sharp. Angry. But I'm done carrying your mistakes. Silence. For the first time in my life, she didn't have an answer. Then her voice turned cold. Ice cold. So you're abandoning your family? I closed my eyes. No. I'm refusing to abandon myself. Another long pause. Then she spoke one final sentence. We'll figure it out ourselves. The line went dead. I stood there, phone still pressed against my ear, listening to nothing. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped it. Years. 18 years. Reduced to one conversation. I walked into the office bathroom, locked myself inside a stall. My knees finally gave out. I slid down the wall. Not because I regretted what I'd said. Because I never imagined what freedom would actually feel like. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't happiness. It was terrifying. Like learning to walk after believing you were supposed to crawl. That night, Celian found me sitting on the couch in complete silence. I told him everything. Every word. Every accusation. Every memory she dragged back into the light. When I finished, he wrapped his arms around me. Didn't offer advice. Didn't try to solve anything. He simply whispered, "They asked you for help. You offered it. They rejected it. They never wanted help. They wanted control." I replayed those words over and over. He was right. If this had really been about Curtis, they would have accepted any help they could get. Instead, they wanted obedience. Nothing else. A few days later, I decided to reach out to Curtis myself. Not through our parents. Just him. The email was simple. I explained that I'd spent the last few days researching hospital payment plans, medical grants, financial assistance programs. I attached every resource I'd found. Then I wrote one final sentence. If you need help navigating any of this, call me. I hit send. And waited. 3 days. Nothing. 4. Still nothing. Every notification made my heart jump. Every vibration sent me reaching for my phone. Finally, on the 5th day, his reply appeared. It was short. Almost painfully short. Thanks. Our parents found another solution. I'm okay. That was it. No explanation. No anger. No warmth either. Just distance. I stared at the screen for several minutes. Part of me felt relieved. Another part wondered if I'd made the wrong choice. Therapy answered that question 2 days later. Dr. Molina listened quietly. When I finished, she asked me something unexpected. When your mother criticized you, what happened inside your body? I frowned. I got quiet. My shoulders tightened. I stopped breathing normally. She nodded. That's trauma, not weakness. Then she smiled gently. But something else happened too. You spoke. You interrupted the pattern. You didn't stay small. I hadn't thought about it that way. Maybe healing wasn't never falling back into old habits. Maybe healing meant recognizing them and choosing differently anyway. Life slowly returned to normal. At least, a new version of normal. Work became busy. Really busy. My architecture firm assigned me to lead the biggest project of my career. A new public library downtown. The kind of opportunity I'd dreamed about since college. For weeks, my mind stayed occupied with blueprints, client meetings, late-night design revisions. One afternoon, after presenting the final concept, my boss smiled. The client loved it. Then he added something I'll never forget. "We trust you." Trust. Such an ordinary word. But I'd spent my childhood believing I couldn't even be trusted to exist without ruining everything. Now, someone was trusting me with a multi-million-dollar project. I walked back to my desk fighting tears. Not because of the promotion, because I finally realized my parents had been wrong about me. Every single time. A few weeks later, Curtis texted. Not about money. Not about our parents. Just coffee? I almost said no. Curiosity won again. We met near the hospital where he'd been having follow-up appointments. For the first 10 minutes, conversation felt painfully awkward. Weather, work, recovery, small talk. Then he looked directly at me. "I've been thinking." I stayed quiet. He continued. "When I was recovering, I watched Mom and Dad panic. They blamed everyone. The doctors, the insurance company, the hospital, the economy. They never once blamed themselves." He laughed bitterly. And then I realized, they've done that my whole life. His eyes met mine. "And yours." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said the words I'd waited my entire life to hear. "I know they made you the scapegoat. I'm sorry I helped them." I felt something loosen inside my chest. Not because everything was suddenly fixed. Nothing could erase childhood. Nothing could undo years of damage. But finally, someone else had seen it. It hadn't all existed only inside my head. Curtis admitted something else. Being the golden child hadn't actually been freedom. It had been another prison. He'd never learned independence. Never learned responsibility. Every mistake had been cleaned up for him. Every consequence delayed. Watching our parents scramble to pay for his surgery had finally forced him to see reality. They needed someone to control. When you left, I became that person. Not the scapegoat. The project. The child they could never let grow up. He smiled sadly. "I'm moving out." A genuine smile spread across my face. "I think that's the healthiest thing you've ever told me." For the first time, we laughed together. Not at someone. Not to survive. Just because we could. Months passed. Curtis found a job. Moved into his own apartment. We started talking occasionally. Short messages at first. Then longer conversations. We weren't trying to rebuild the childhood we'd never had. We were building something completely new. Adult siblings. Meeting each other for the first time. Meanwhile, life kept surprising me. Good surprises. The kind I used to believe couldn't happen. One Friday evening, my coworkers organized a celebration dinner after our library project was officially approved. The restaurant buzzed with conversation. People raised glasses. Laughed. My boss stood up. Tapped his fork gently against a glass. Then looked at me. This project happened because she refused to settle for average. Everyone applauded. I froze. Nobody had ever celebrated me before. Not like this. Back home, Curtis got parties. I got warnings not to embarrass the family. Now, a room full of people genuinely believed in me. I blinked quickly, trying not to cry. Celian squeezed my hand under the table. He didn't have to say anything. He knew. Therapy sessions became less frequent. Weekly turned into every other week. Then once a month. One afternoon, Dr. Molina leaned back in her chair. "You know what I notice?" I smiled. "What?" "You're not surviving anymore. You're living." I sat there quietly, because she was right. Somewhere along the way, my entire identity had changed. I wasn't running away from my past anymore. I was building toward my future. A few months later, Celine and I spent the weekend by the ocean. Gray skies, cold wind. The waves crashed endlessly against the shoreline. I walked alone for a while, thinking, when I was little, I'd believed I was born carrying bad luck. Standing there, watching the tide erase footprints almost as quickly as they appeared, I finally understood something. Babies don't destroy families. Adults do. My father lost jobs because of his own choices. My mother ignored her health because of hers. Their finances collapsed because they never planned ahead. None of that had anything to do with a 6-month-old baby. They hadn't needed a daughter. They needed someone to blame. And I happened to be there. The realization didn't erase the pain, but it erased the lie. Winter arrived. Life became peaceful. Almost unbelievably peaceful. Then one Tuesday night, Celine sat beside me on the couch. He looked unusually nervous. My cat stretched lazily across the armrest before wandering into the bedroom. He took my hand. I don't want to wait for the perfect moment. His voice trembled slightly. I already have my perfect life. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a simple silver ring. Will you marry me? I didn't let him finish. Yes. The word came out through tears. Happy tears. The kind I'd never experienced growing up. He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. We just laughed, cried, held each other. In that quiet little condo, I realized something. Love wasn't supposed to hurt. Home wasn't supposed to feel dangerous. Family wasn't supposed to make you question your worth. Curtis was one of the first people I told. His reply came only minutes later. I'm really happy for you. No jealousy. No sarcasm. Just genuine happiness. Months later, he stood at my wedding. Not as the golden child. Not as the brother who once called me Jinx. Just my brother. Trying to become a better man. I mailed one final letter to my parents before the wedding. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It simply explained my boundaries. If they wanted a relationship with me, it would have to be built on respect, not blame, not guilt, not manipulation. Weeks passed. No reply. Oddly enough, their silence no longer hurt. It answered everything I needed to know. Today, when I look around my home, I don't see evidence that I'm cursed. I see framed blueprints from projects I'm proud of. I see a cat asleep in the window. I see photographs with friends who became family. I see the man who looked at every broken piece of me and never once asked me to become smaller. Most importantly, I see myself, not as the unlucky daughter, not as the burden, not as the family curse, just a woman who survived people determined to convince her she was unworthy and built a beautiful life anyway. Because here's what I finally learned. I never took my family's luck when I left. They never had any luck to lose. They only lost the one person who spent 18 years carrying the weight of every mistake they refused to own. And the day I walked out of that house, I didn't escape a curse. I escaped the people who invented it.